Are we on group chat?
I think we're on group chat.
All
It's easier to
right.
change it.
Hello. We are doing a test, so don't get too excited.
Yes. But we will be starting very soon, so be prepared.
And with that said, God said, let there be sound.
Honestly, let's do it.
Sounds good.
That's great.
Yeah.
Time to do the podcast.
I
Alrighty.
can't tell if it's my Zen state at the moment, but um that sounds
Yeah,
good.
great. I'm feeling pretty zen too, honestly. Pretty zoned in. We're out. I don't really know which one. All right, guys. We'll be back very soon. Give us
Yep.
a couple seconds, and then we'll be right back with some LSTM cells, going over that, and then the hypothalamus. Or
As well.
strike that, reverse it. So,
Wait,
yes,
it's not that. Reverse it.
reverse it there. Say it backwards.
Hypothalamus. Cannot say that backwards.
Yeah, no. Done. All right, bye. Hello and welcome to ThetaWave Podcast. I am your host, Jacob Holland. I'm a neuroscience researcher here with my co-host, Ryan Reed. He is also a neuroscience researcher and a machine learning expert, singer, songwriter, and he does a bunch of other stuff too. So
Mm,
he's a pretty awesome guy.
I try.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Um,
hmm
yeah, so we've got an interesting podcast today,
That's
mainly
for sure.
because initially we were planning on doing uncovering the hypothalamus
Yeah.
and the LSTM cells. However, LSTM cells are one of those things that are is a really cool concept to understand. However, um, the it is does get pretty technical on the inside, and
hmm
following all the different moving parts that are like working together to create these different components um, can get a little bit hairy. And so I just didn't quite feel like I was had processed enough on how to explain it
Mm.
correctly
And I
in
know
a way that can.
you had some really good visuals to show us too.
I do, yeah. And
So
what
yeah.
was really cool is like we have an animation that I created now for following the path of the data through the LSTM cell to help us visualize that. But there's still a lot of components that happen at the same time that um, kind of you know go into making separate pieces that eventually get used
Mm.
um, to further the cell's knowledge throughout a sequence. And so it just gets a little complicated,
Yeah.
so I wanted to kind of work on refining my explanation of it a little bit more
Yeah, that
before
makes
presenting
sense.
it. So place of that, we're going to just be doing a free flow section today.
Yep, we're just gonna be talking about well, I think we have a little bit of
Yeah,
a
we do have
subject.
an idea, but it
Yeah.
was because we had thought of beforehand a topic that
Mhm.
we actually started talking about it and decided we wanted
Yes.
to save it for the
We are going
podcast.
to be talking about a little bit of kind of the paradox of morality. And
Mhm.
if we wanna say overarching morality, because I don't wanna say objective morality, because that's not really the right word. I mean, we could get into if morality is objective, but also kind of the, subjective experience of it and what it means for individuals and how that agglomerates together and interacts with the society. And disclaimer, we are not professional philosophers. However, we do dabble in
I'm
it.
not quite sure what exactly would qualify as a professional philosopher.
Someone with a philosophy degree, I guess.
So you need
But
a
do they even
degree
get
to be a
paid?
professional?
I mean, I would guess so. I mean, there's not really like a other way. I mean, I
You don't
guess
need degrees to be a professional.
well, I guess that's true. I guess why else would you get a degree in philosophy then? Are they just stupid? Not very
Well, I mean,
philosophically
I
sound
I
then.
don't know. Like that's one my question is like what you were pursuing philosophy, what would be your end goal there? Like,
Mm,
would you be trying to
very
teach?
philosophical.
Would you be trying to teach philosophy? Would
I
you
would guess
be
so.
trying to just argue with people better? Like what? Like
Yeah. I actually realized that it was Aristotle who said that the whole is bigger than the sum of its parts. I realize it's a little outdated. So yeah. 'Cause
well, Aristotle is wrong.
yeah, probably. He was wrong about a lot of things. However, he still lies in the hearts of a lot of influential pieces of, movements in the
I
field.
mean, in a literal sense, Aristotle was wrong. I tend to doubt that he meant that in most literal sense.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
assuming he strictly meant it in a uh, catchy, like saying like to illustrate the fact that we are um, that often the functionality that emerges from a um, collection of parts is more functional than each of the individual parts, the sum of each individual
Yeah.
part.
It's definitely it's kind of, the precursor to systems thinking, which is, understanding the world through the dynamics of relationships between, uh, like, wholes, like, whole parts interacting with each other sorry, whole systems interacting with each other and not separating it down into the parts. And I think that's kind of where that extension, um that's how it kind of extends into kinda current philosophies. It's kind of that systems thinking, which is interesting. I haven't really gotten into any of that, but I know a lot of people who are in functional nutrition, which is kind of where I'm kind of dabbling in a little bit and kind of looking at the whole of the body. And I it's an interesting approach, but you still need to get into the nitty-gritty stuff
Yeah.
for sure. But
So the specific, I don't think we need a disclaimer when we're talking about philosophy about not being professionals.
yeah, that's
Like,
true. Why would you need to be a professional in philosophy?
well, I'm just
Hmm.
saying I don't think we need a disclaimer like
Yeah.
about not being
That was
professionals. It's
honestly
like
more so a joke. But
the yeah, the specific area of morality that kind of we're talking about is not
I guess we should get our definitions
is
straight.
not necessarily relevant because it's more of and it does the context is more of a societal as far as in society, but like morality as a whole is something that, at least from my perspective, emerges from um, and is developed by society. So like without
Mhm,
other people, there's no reason to have like morals.
mhm.
And so it's the community element there that creates morality for us, and um, the evolution of that
Yeah.
concept. And um, do you remember what I was saying earlier that kind of we almost got talking about before we stopped it?
Uh, I'm not 100% sure because it was just so quick. I kinda forgot. Um, it was what were we talking about right before? Because there was something that was kinda, like, leading up to that. We're talking about I think we're talking about, like, personalities for a
Hmm.
second, talking about your
Yeah,
dad
we were
and my
talking about
mom.
fives, I
Mhm.
think. Oh yeah, and we were talking about one of the things we were talking about was how um, what's interesting is for those that know the terms, the chaotic, like chaotic good
Oh,
or
yeah, yeah.
chaotic
Mhm.
evil, or um, you know, forgot what it's called. I think it's uh, order good or like blanking on the name. But anyway, it's like they're like D&D terms that are used that or they originated from D&D that are used to like describe people's overall, like the combination of their overall like personality with their morality
Mhm.
and their kind of maturity and just like that overall vibe. And so if somebody's like chaotic, chaotic good, it means that like typically their morals tend to fall on the side of what would be considered good, um, but their emotions and their actions tend to be more chaotic,
Mhm.
and they um, will have kind of varying levels of
Yeah.
responses. And then we were talking about how fives, the Enneagram 5, because for those that joined us in the podcast that we did, where Jacob took the Enneagram
Yep,
test,
and I got a 5.
and turns out that it looks like he is a 5,
Mhm.
and which means that we're both fives actually.
Yeah.
But the
My answers were pretty chaotic, so I'm probably, like, somewhere between, like, chaotic and neutral.
well, there's an
So,
element of youth there that
that's true.
at play that I was thinking about. Because when I was your age, I was similar in a lot of ways
Mhm.
and had a more optimistic, like people oriented view on certain things. And
Yeah.
that was something that kind of diminished as age,
Mhm.
and life happened. But
That's actually an interesting topic, if optimism actually has a place in a degrading society, and if
mm,
it's optimism that's curated for the continuation of the current system, is that actually a negative thing overall for you as a person?
oh yeah, that it would be interesting. Let's finish the
Mhm.
part
Yeah, we can
this
do that,
topic
yeah.
first.
Like, that's popping in my
um,
head.
but Anyway, back to what I was saying. The five is actually one of the only temperaments that has a that is known kind of known as true neutral. Like,
Mm,
um, so like meaning they're not chaotic and they're not orderly, like or whatever. I'm
mm,
blanking on that term there,
yeah,
but um the and they're not good and they're not evil. They're neutral across the board.
across the board neutral.
And that's known as true neutral.
Is it because of that emotional filtering aspect,
Hmm.
you think?
Yeah, so they have a very their goal is knowledge and truth, which gives them an inherent opposition to biases of all types. So because they're seeking truth, they don't want bias to influence their view or their opinion of
Yeah,
things. And so with that comes that emotional filtering, um, as well as other types of filtering that allow them to maintain a more middle ground
mm.
like view of everything.
Do you think morality gets in the way of truth?
Yes, 100%. I think it can.
Mm,
And I think it often does. And oftentimes it can be a healthy thing for society. I mean,
yeah,
like,
for sure.
it's like almost like the concept of, well, I mean, is it moral to lie if the lie is helpful? If the lie helps
Yeah.
somebody or helps them avoid pain.
Now
Um,
what if it helps you avoid short-term pain?
right. It's like, and that's, kind of the oftentimes, just as an example, the evaluation that happens in five's minds when they're making decisions. They don't like have an inherently like good, bad, moral or immoral perspective on things.
Mm,
It's a matter of calculated like
yeah,
outcomes and a cognitive like decision of, okay, if I choose this action, here's the worst that could happen. If I choose this action, here's the worst that could happen. If I choose this action, here's the best that could happen. If I choose this action,
makes
here's the
sense.
best could happen. And then choosing the one mm, that does the least damage and provides the most benefit. So,
Yeah,
like for instance, if me telling you something is going to cause you a lot of emotional distress, and through that, me a lot of emotional distress,
mhm,
and then not telling you is not going to affect your life in any way, I'm going to choose 100% not to tell you,
yeah.
regardless of the morality of it.
Oh, for sure.
Like there's that is the kind of I'm not going to choose a moral for the moral's sake.
Mhm,
I'm going to choose a moral because it's the logical
yeah.
choice.
I mean, the optimal thing, I think, would be to just not say anything. It's, uh it's definitely a lot better than lying about something. Like, you don't wanna give someone, like, a fake compliment, for example, you know? That's definitely something that
I
I've
don't think
noticed.
anybody benefits from that.
Oh, no, not
Like,
at all. Except, I do say there is some short-term benefit, but
so,
over a
well,
period of
I
time,
actually I want to
that is something.
walk back on that statement because there I can think of times when someone is in need of emotional bolstering
Mm,
and they're at a point where not receiving that could be detrimental.
yeah.
I think in that instance, not necessarily lying, because in my
Yeah, that's different than
my
encouragement.
opinion on that is like if I ever give somebody, I rarely give somebody a compliment that I don't actually mean.
Yeah.
In fact, almost never, because to me that degrades the value of my compliment when I actually give it to
Oh, for
somebody.
sure.
And so, if I were in that situation, what I'd probably do is I'd probably find a way to speak a truth and then inflate it, you know,
Inflate the truth,
in
which
in order to help bolster
yeah,
their emotional state.
I mean, for me personally, the approach that I usually use when it comes to helping others is kind of looking at it from a dopaminergic perspective and starting kind of at this place of accepting who you are and then accepting who you can become and the pathway forward towards that, and then give them a purpose through that. That's probably one of the best approaches that I've seen to ever work, if it does work. But if it doesn't work, then usually it's pretty bad. And you kind of just want to conflate the truth about them because there are so many people that have genuinely good qualities. And honestly, I think if we're going to talk about morality, I think the most moral thing to do is to use kind of this kind of this intrinsic sociability that all humans have and need desperately. Like even sociopaths, the worst punishment you can give them is isolation. People who are completely devoid of emotions and are the most isolated in society can't even handle complete isolation. So we have this very much this need for this social aspect of our humanity. And the best way I think to utilize that in a moral way would be to conflate the best aspects of other people so that they can realize that and then, you know, plant the seeds for it to manifest as a true beautiful foundation for like
Mm.
a just a garden they can cultivate for themselves.
I would say I agree with
Perhaps
most of
that's all wrong.
what you said. I think that, there are certain people that could handle complete isolation. Myself being one of them. Like, I have experienced long-term periods of, like, pretty much
Mm,
chosen,
yeah.
isolation. And it sucks in a lot of ways. Like, it's not, there are times that you miss that, social
Mhm,
component and element there and the ability to bounce things off of people and whatnot. But the more I did it, the more I felt myself adapting to it and kind of losing the components and the need for those other social elements. And so I think that basically what happens is get that given enough time and the right adaptability, the reliance on those things would
mm,
diminish and
potentially.
um, you would find other ways of kind of finding, some sort of meaning or fulfillment,
Mhm.
there.
Yeah, that that's very interesting because, like you said, you kind of, transitioned between this need for sociability and then found a different purpose in life,
Mhm.
and you could find that you could completely immerse yourself in that, not really have this need for people.
Mhm.
And I haven't done that personally because I've just always kind of had just, like, people in my life. So I don't really
Right.
know what that would look like. I'm very much an introvert, so I do like my alone time, but after a while, even I'm like, "Okay, I desperately need to talk to somebody,"
Yeah,
you
and
know?
I get that way too now, but, like, there was a time where, like, especially during kind of the COVID period and after it, like, I was already so isolated
Mhm.
that, and then, in addition, at that time, my car was experiencing problems, so I couldn't drive as many places as
Mm.
I wanted to, which
Yeah.
inhibited my ability to actually be sociable anyway, even if I could.
Mhm. Now that's
And,
interesting.
and so as a result, I adapted to just being by myself and, like, um, really found out how to immerse myself in, like, research and find meaning in, like, knowledge and projects and whatnot,
Yeah.
and I felt those, like, the need for social elements, like, kind of
Mhm.
dropping away to the point that probably once I re-immersed myself back, oops, I think I still had it on you.
Oh, no.
Um, Once I re-immersed myself
And they're just nodding.
back into a social environment, I was a little bit abrasive to the social environment
Mm.
because I was used to operating by myself.
Yeah.
And, when I would, I would, was like argumentative, was like kind of a little bit inconsiderate of people's emotions and, just kind of lost some of those social
Yeah.
nicety
You
components.
kinda traded that off for something you felt was more important,
Right.
or the only thing you could grasp
Right. And the thing that,
onto at
kind of like
the time.
the almost like substituted in a different way of finding value than the social components in my brain
Mhm.
and started trying to build those up as something that was
Yeah.
valuable. And so kind of diminishing the capabilities or
Mm.
like uh of the social components, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, that's definitely something an interesting topic would be the morality of forcing the entire population of kids that are in very vital stages of development that are desperately in need for sociability in order to set those behavioral tones for the rest of their lives, they completely lost that, and they didn't get that chance. Is that a moral thing to do? What's the
Mm,
trade-off there?
yeah, that's true. I feel like we'd be flying really close to some areas that are likely to enrage certain people.
I mean, honestly,
I don't particularly care, but I don't know if we wanna do that.
thank you,
But,
Wuhan Labs.
um,
Appreciate it. Yeah.
the getting back to the original topic, though, that we were gonna
Yes.
cover, the what we were progressing from there, like, when we were talking about the, true neutrality,
Mhm.
um, it kind of evolved into a conversation of the nature of morality and why it exists and how we tend to view morality as completely paradoxical to its actual nature.
Mhm.
So we like viewing morality as a black and white scenario. This is right, this is wrong, this is something you do, this is something you don't do.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I can't believe you said that, like, kind of thing. And where we have these very solid binary stances on stuff.
Yeah.
And the reality of morality is that it is not that way. It is a set of rules that we put in place to better integrate with society together and help people work
Yes.
together and exist and coexist and function better as a unit.
Mhm.
And um and we can't draw these lines and be right 100% of the time,
That's for sure.
because they're not. There might be the majority of situations that fall within that line, that we
Mhm.
draw, but it's a gradient, and like there are going to be, um, it's all about a calculation and it's like trying to create a single linear equation that accounts for all outcomes. You can't do that.
You
That
really
was the
can't.
same problem that we had with machine learning,
Mhm.
initially, was when um, we uh, had first started with like regression and whatnot. Um, the linear regression,
Mhm.
the you couldn't create anything really complex with it that accounted for all input data situations because it was a linear equation,
Yeah.
and that's the same thing with morality. You can't choose one rule that just accounts for all situations. It might account for most of them that come up,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be perfect and it's not going to account for all. And so the we viewing it as in that binary way is kind of an inherently flawed
Yes,
hypothesis.
that's actually very interesting because that kind of makes me think of the very much prevalent asymmetry between personal morality and the justice system. Because we do have these gray areas that we deal with and assign a jury and a probability based on the evidence, and then kind of look at it in that direction, where we do kind of have this gray area that is decided the best way that's possible, purely logical, purely through
Right.
fact, and as much as we would like it to be, even if that's
Well,
not completely the
what
case.
we do is we assign those juries to decide based on the fact, the probability of them having broken one of our binary laws.
Hmm.
So
Yes,
that it's
and
still a binary morality. It's just a probabilistic, like,
yeah.
view of the evidence leading up to it,
Mhm.
and which is, kind of a interesting topic because the if we shed that view of morals as binary,
Mhm.
The becomes a simple matter of evaluating the outcome of people's actions
Yeah.
and the weighing the good against the evil.
I mean, that's that yeah, I mean,
And so if somebody can make a case, like for instance, if you had a jury and your job was to make a case that the outcome of your actions was worth the negative that happened as a result, then it becomes a much more fluid approach to the judgment, and kind of morality as a whole,
yeah.
um, and working together as a society, because you account for situations that are outliers.
Mhm.
And like for instance, classic example that you and I have talked about, like if there is a politician that is deeply entrenched in the system and is controlling a lot of different things and preventing a lot of different good stuff from happening and causing a lot of different bad stuff to happen. And
Mhm.
that is stuff that you can prove but can't do anything about because of the
Yeah.
way that the system is set up.
Yeah, and the way they control the narrative.
Exactly. And you kill them. Like the
The legal system and the
the
actual
legal
morality of
system
it.
the legal system are now would say that like you go to prison for life or
Yeah,
like or
definitely.
worse. But in my opinion, that actually is a moral action if the outcome of that person's death actually does lead to improvements,
Yeah.
and for society.
Mhm.
And because that means that person was a hindrance to society's growth.
I mean, that I would say that intrinsically as a philosophical idea, that theoretically would be something that would be considered a moral action, that would be on the side of good. However,
Because it benefits society.
that as an actual societal collective idea that then gets actualized probably would come out very detrimental, and you would
Well,
have
you
ideological
think that.
radicals.
You think that. But then people start seeing the outcome when they make those decisions and the evaluations that end up happening because they have to prove that the outcome of their action was worth it
Mm,
when they get caught.
yeah,
And so if there there is not a clear like value to what it is that they did,
yeah,
which means that like so let's just say that you don't like a politician, and like you disagree with their decisions
yeah,
they're making, yada, and you're like, I'm gonna kill
yeah,
them because it's okay, and like
because
I'm
it's
sure it'll be like it'll make
Ryan told
improvements.
me on a podcast this was the
Yeah,
moral
exactly.
thing to
So you
do.
take them out, you kill them, you get caught, you get brought into court because that was opinion based and not actually fact based, where they were actually causing a problem and their death didn't resolve anything
Mhm,
and didn't lead to an improvement. There's going to be like a they're going to have a very very difficult time trying to prove there was any value
yeah,
to their action that
mhm,
outweighed the bad,
mhm. It's just
and so and maybe the first example wasn't quite what I meant, because a better example would be if that person was actively um, causing a degradation to
yeah.
quality of people's quality of life. That you can
Like,
bring.
let's say that they're like I think a good example would be actually a lot of politicians that are probably involved in this is kind of this, kind of underground society of, sex trafficking and selling children, getting involved in that, um, and, kinda like the child sacrifice that kind of happens kinda behind the scenes, a little bit of that stuff. If they're involved in that, and then plus they're a part of the coalition of manipulating kind of this system in order to maximize their benefit while maximizing the rest of society's suffering, all of that in conglomeration, that is a very good moral case for ending their life because that's something that, if exposed to the face of kind of the population, of course they would get something that's akin to life in jail or the death penalty.
Mhm.
And taking that into your own hands probably has some like systemic moral issues, but on a personal intrinsic level is something that could be considered on the side of moral good, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah,
So,
and there's a little bit of so even with that approach, that kind of more expansive approach to morality where you calculate probabilities of, the benefit outweighing the bad side. There is a little bit there's you still run into a little bit of difficulty where now you have to find a way to assign value to things like
yeah.
human life
Mhm,
versus quality of life. So,
mhm,
how much is a human life worth versus quality of life improvement for other humans? And so the um that presents a little bit of a difficulty because you have to figure out how that value system is going to work. And,
mm,
and in my eyes, like that we should always take things in the context of my actions are completely my own as long as they don't inhibit another person's
mm.
ability to live their life. And
What if your action
um,
of not killing that politician inhibits a very large majority of people's
well,
to live their
here
lives?
exactly, and like that. Here's the thing: it's like that politician, because they're in a position of power, in a position of decision making, their actions or inactions affect a lot of people's ability to live their life
Mm, yeah,
and live their life well. And so there's it puts, it makes almost adds a element, and I think this would be incredibly beneficial. It obviously, there's components here that, within this type of a system that could be problematic, but like what that would do is it would put a very high responsibility and mortality, um, like on the position of politician and leadership.
yeah,
Who would want to get into a position of power if they were in it for the for what we all want, which is ultimately feeling comfortable and safe? Who would want to get into that position of power if their decisions came with a lot more mortality weight, like because of the amount of people they impacted? So
yeah.
your life as a whole has a lot like wider. So, okay, here, maybe this is a good way to describe it. Me as somebody that is, just a regular person in a professional field, like has a regular amount of influence on my friends' lives and whatnot. I have my ratio of of influence on other people's lives, and thus um my life value fluctuates
Mm,
very little. It's like this. But the more people that you influence and the more lives that you influence positively or negatively increases that fluctuation of your life
okay.
value. So the more people that you impact, like politicians, the people, decision makers, like that would be a very, very wide fluctuation. So they've influenced for good, they become high value, very safe. Meaning if somebody like were to try and kill them, like it'd be very hard for them to prove that it was worth it
Mhm,
because they've had a positive impact on
yeah,
people's lives. If they've made a lot of bad decisions and like that's negatively impacted people's life, that fluctuation would like be a lot lower than for a normal person. meaning that it would degrade the value of the life, meaning that it'd be, a lot easier for that action to be justified.
Mm.
And, there's, those these are kind of like, it's like, well, why would you want to operate in within a society like that? Because that seems like very, like, well,
Murderous.
anyone could kill anyone kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, why would you want to operate in a society that had those fluctuant rules? Like, would you really want to operate in a society that has rigid rules for every single like one rule for like all situations that doesn't apply to all situations? Like, you want to be caught in a situation where
Mhm.
you're the outlier and you get forced to abide by a rule that doesn't fit your situation.
Yeah.
And or do you want to live in a system that takes every situation dynamically
Mhm.
and adjusts its decision based off of
Yeah.
the logic of the value behind it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's, you definitely get into some interesting dynamics there because what I do think is really nice is that I think we're actually headed towards the direction as a collective intelligence, as kind of a a very l this is kinda like as human civilization progresses, we've kind of become more aware of why we go to war, why these people do certain things. It's not because, "Oh, they're the bad guys and we're the good guys," like, kinda they said in, the First World War or the Second World War, "We're doing this because we want to protect our values." It's like, no, you want to generate insurmountable amounts of wealth and power so that you can kind of continue this progression towards endless war that can kind of generate this uh, stable income for yourself and larger progression towards world domination. I mean, that seems to be kind of at least on the wealth side, and then that wealth side influences the politicians. And so you have this really interesting dichotomy between, well, why are the politicians even there in the first place? How did we get to the point to where we have no clue? We genuinely have no clue why these people are here, why these people voted for them, and there seems to be very
And
much,
no clue, like, the actuality of
yeah, of who
the
they,
votes.
yeah, the votes, they're,
How does and this is not a conspiracy theory. I don't have a theory as to this because I don't know
mm,
and because I don't have enough information, which is part of the problem. Um,
nobody has enough
the
information.
How do we know what votes are like, whether votes even, have any sort of weight?
Mm,
Because we can't see any of it. It's all taken care of behind the scenes.
yeah.
And the people that run the scenes have an investment in who gets into the scene. And so it would seem like a logical development for those people to take control over the voting system.
I mean, personally, I'm not sure about the American voting system. I think that there have been attempts to perhaps overthrow the current system, kinda like Trump's saying that, he should have won the 2020 election and that was actually stolen from him. So he's going to try to take that election and be like, no, it was actually
Every
me.
politician says that.
Yeah,
Like,
and then, we have him winning in 2028. So obviously it's not completely rigged against him. So there've been attempts in, like the dissolution of voter ID or needing an ID to vote in many different states. It's like, okay, you're kind of allowing all of these other people who really shouldn't be voting and aren't allowed to vote. And so that's kind of some influence there as well. And then we can look at other countries, in the entire geopolitical space. We see that there are these democracies with the same guy who's been in there for 40 years. And then his son gets off and he's been in there for the last 20 years. It's like, do you really think that this corrupt, poverty stricken little country
right.
is really voting for this person every single time?
And
Obviously not.
it's, you're right. And it's not in my example or situation that I was presenting, it wasn't so much about like me thinking that it was rigged. Like I said, I
Yeah,
didn't
no, I don't think
beforehand.
it's either.
I don't have enough information to say for sure one way or the other. But that's again, that is the problem. And like, it's not about whether or not they are manipulating the system or the votes. It is a matter of the fact that they could, and
Mhm.
that there's not I don't know what is happening
But there's enough
because I
incentive.
should know.
Yeah.
Like, as a voter, like, you should be able to keep track of that stuff
Mhm.
as as it happens. Like, we should be able to see as people come in and vote, we should be able to see our vote counting towards, a maybe a local vote or something like that, and be
Yeah.
involved in that process. And there should be a lot more security, like for people's ballots, if that's the system in which
Yeah.
they want to use. Like, I don't
Mhm.
necessarily think that is a good system at all. Like, I think there's a
No.
better version of that out there, but that's a separate topic.
Yeah.
Um,
And, this, it's and we're kinda delving into, like, more, like, systemic morality and human flourishing as a collective, And I don't know if we wanna take a step back to kinda like the subjective morality because that's subjective morality is interesting because that doesn't necessarily mean that there are true ways in which you can simulate and have the same behavior every time that kind of gives the same moral result, that telling the truth in a specific situation, and having these I guess, rules, these values that you don't really want to betray because they're ingrained in you. Like for me personally, I would say that an aspect of my morality is to always look for the truth, no matter where it lies. And I would say that is a part of my subjective morality and something that I can't negate. It's not something that I can cross over and say, this isn't really worth it anymore.
I would almost argue that that is a personal value, not a morality.
But
Like,
it's hard to
it can
clear the
affect your
boundary.
morality. It's something that a value that affects your morality, but it does not it's not a morality in and of itself. Like, in
Mhm.
my view, morality is something that is an opinion or a a thought that influences your interactions with other people or your opinions on something. And so and whether or not you do something in a society or don't do it,
Well,
And so search for truth can certainly affect that. Christianity as being a value, or like another any other religion at being a value, can affect that, that morality. And and so I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at with the subjective morality term. Um, if you're saying subjective morality being more of your value system.
well, it's
Um,
I mean, I I look at morality very simply. It's a simple distinction between what I define as good and what I define as bad. That's really
mhm.
all you can really get from it. I mean, you can say that there are objective kind of
But see,
things
I don't view things like that. Like, I there is to me there is no good and bad. There's only worth it and not worth it.
positive results, negative results, good, bad, yes, no. That
Right.
seems all kind of similar and kind of in that same group together.
But there's a difference because good and bad implicates good and evil. And I don't view things in a binary, this is good and this is evil. I view things as this is worth it and this is not worth it.
Yeah.
And it's worth it or not worth it now,
Mm.
like in this context.
Do you think
And so,
everything can be kind of have a viewpoint of anything being respectively to the situation having a worth it.
um, I no, I think there are things that I don't like assigning universal values, but like I think there are things that the large majority of their cases always fall on one side or the other. So they're generally or almost always going to be this way
Mhm,
or this way, if not,
mhm.
always. But like, again, I don't like universals. And so,
Yeah,
um, the, however, those cases are kind of few and far between and like are generally very um, kind of obvious and evident. Majority of things lie somewhere closer to the middle, where like some cases would lie over here and some cases would lie over here.
Yeah.
And um, so
But I think the truth reveals all of that as to where they lie. And that
well,
kind of
that's
showcases.
assuming that perfect truth can be can be attained, which oftentimes it can't. Um, there is a certain element of um, guesswork that is always going to be involved. You know, there's like an element of unknowns,
Mhm.
whether it's a jury making decisions or whether it's you know, a scientist. Uh,
Having predictions
well,
come from
that's
a
actually
series.
one of the reasons why science kind of defines scientific facts the way that they do,
Mhm.
which is that, you know, essentially that um, is a prediction that has always held true. Like it is something that has always been true. Not to say that it couldn't necessarily ever change
Yeah.
in the future, but every single test that has ever been run on it and it continues to hold true no matter what the circumstances.
Yeah.
Like that is, and so, um, you know, there is, that's why one of the reasons I don't, you know, think that generally those that, um, that we can really call or like really truly discover 100% of truth because there's an element of unknown where you could
Oh, yeah,
be.
of course. I mean, that's even true in
And
science.
so,
It's always a deeper layer.
right.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, there's always potential for more additions or more information. Yeah.
But is there something that is good enough to get an accurate result? That
Oh yeah. Well, there's stuff that's good enough to get an accurate result for sure. Yeah.
even when
And
it
there's,
comes to the way we should act in accordance with what we would define subjectively or
but
objectively as
that's
morality.
what I'm saying is like, I don't, people view morals as a value that is held that holds true all of the time.
Mhm.
I should always be honest. I should never kill somebody. I should never, um, you know, I should never steal somebody's stuff. Like, obviously, it varies from person to person what those morals are, but you get my point. Like, you know, abortion is always bad. Um, like the, or, um, you know, drugs are always bad. Like those kinds of thoughts, you know, where you just
Yeah.
developed a universal opinion on something that can't
That can't
change. And
change.
I like don't think morals should be viewed that way. I think they should be viewed as something that is fluid and dynamic with the moment. Like, okay, in my experience, yes, the majority of times, in fact, the vast majority of times in situations I can think of in life, killing somebody is not worth it.
Yeah.
It's not helpful. Like, and but I'm not going to hold that as a universal value. I'm going to evaluate every new situation if that should come up, you know, like I can't
Mm.
imagine situations where I have to constantly be dealing with that in life, but like,
Yeah.
um,
Every new person, you're gonna be like, "Do I have
do
to
I need
kill
to kill
you?"
you? No.
It's probably not happening.
But like, you know, that's something that you just, you hold, you take, evaluate with every new context that pops up. And you don't just reject something because it doesn't fit your universal moral.
Yeah.
Um, and so like for instance, for example, with me, how much truth I share with somebody, and this is probably something that's more true for a lot of people, um, and is probably a good example of this because it holds true for a lot of
Mhm.
different people. how much truth I share with somebody, how honest I am with them
Yeah.
is evaluated almost every single time that I interact with them,
Mm.
and conglomeration of a lot of different things and probabilistic outcome projections for me.
Mhm.
If I give them this much truth, what is the likely outcome here? If I give them this much truth, what is the likely outcome? And
Yeah.
then choosing the best outcome for you and them, with usually for people, for me, I am um, err slightly on the side of bias towards me as opposed to them, usually,
Yeah.
because we all need a certain amount of bias in case we get stuck in a situation where the available information is
Mhm.
equal, like there are equally
Yeah.
likely outcomes.
I mean, I always I don't always, but I sometimes think about the intrinsic value of someone else's life in respect to mine for myself, you know?
Mm.
And if
See, that's how jumping in front of a bullet for somebody happens.
exactly, exactly. I mean, there are obviously people in my life that I would do that for, personally, and it's not necessarily
There's
even
nobody in my life I would do that for.
it's kind of just a byproduct of kinda just the way I care for people. There's I place very but anyways, we don't have to really get into that. What I was gonna talk about
I do want to hear the end of that sentence, though.
well, I was just gonna say there's this, deep kind of just intrinsic morality that isn't have anything to do with probability, no statistics as to why I should do it, but
It's
a deep
emotion based.
knowing that this is what I must do, that is completely emotional, completely, and it's something that I
You'll
recognize
get rid of that as you mature.
potentially, I mean, I don't it's hard to say. I mean
There was a time in my life that I was that way too,
mhm,
and I would have said that I would have, taken a bullet for people, and it was, but as time has gone on and I've like started processing my relationships and the reason behind those um, evaluations,
mhm,
realizing that a um, it is a value that is being screwed up in my head by my emotions.
mm,
It's the assigning too much value to someone else's
yeah,
life
mhm,
and um, their my ability to operate without it.
yeah,
And so while I would do everything in my power to keep that person, you know, there are a lot of people that I would do everything in my power to keep that person from dying, and even to the point of, shortening my own lifespan. Um,
now
the there's nobody that I think it would be worth me ending my own life for them to continue living,
yeah,
because I just don't assign value to people like that.
mhm,
Like um, there are people that I hold in high value for me, like as far as my value system goes, like there are people like you that I hold in really high value, but nobody whose value usurps my own.
mhm, and that's kinda where I was gonna go is, obviously, I'm gonna kinda steal from you. Usually, the situations pertaining to these types of issues aren't binary.
Hmm.
Instead of it being kinda black and white, either you die or they die, it's you can get a little more specific to where you attempting to save their life
Causes you to die.
causes you to have a very high risk of getting seriously injured or
Yeah.
for the
And
majority of the part,
sometimes
dying.
that's a miscalculation, in the moment. Sometimes you have to make a hasty decision on
Mhm.
it, and so that kind of stuff doesn't make, if you're jumping in front of a bullet for somebody, you might be thinking at the time that person is aiming at them to try and kill them. If I throw myself in the way, it puts a something they are not aiming at directly in the
Yeah,
way,
so you
and
can say both of them.
thus
Both of
it
us,
is
yeah.
less likely to hit me in a
Mhm.
vital area than it
Yeah.
is them, you
Mhm.
know? And so that might be like the thought process
Yeah.
that's going on there. And so
Mhm.
that in that case, that could
Yeah.
potentially make sense. I still don't think there's anybody that I would come to that evaluation for unless I saw a high like, if I was able to position myself properly to block it,
Yeah.
like, I would take that risk. But,
Mhm.
like
Or somehow get control of their weapon or their gun and,
right. Yeah,
that
exactly. If
things like
if
that.
it was a matter of, like, okay, I'm over here, they're aiming at them over there, but they could turn their gun if they see me, you know, I would probably take that risk. Like, I would
Mhm.
I would run up to them and, try and
Yeah,
get their
control their
gun
gun.
and risk my life that way for them.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
And I think
but I just to me, jumping in front of a bullet kind of a thing, jumping on a grenade kind of thing, like that feels like too much of a blatant certainty and disregard for your own life,
Mhm.
and a misevaluation, you
I
know?
mean, personally, I think I I saw this one meme on Instagram that I thought it kinda reminded me of this conversation. It's where somebody jumps in front of the person who's about to shoot a gun, and they shoot him in the head, and he falls over. They both look at him, and the guy with the gun goes and just shoots the person afterwards, you know? So now both of them are dead. You know? It's kinda like situation like that where you really wanna calculate, the risk and kinda like the actual end result. And if the end result is going to be both of y'all dead, well, obviously, that's not optimal. The optimal thing to do would be to go for the gun, you know?
That is funny how in movies when somebody jumps in front of a gun or a shot,
Yeah, they always get saved somehow in the end.
somehow the person always gets saved, but there's more bullets in the gun.
Yeah, there's not just one. We're not using muskets here, you know? So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Also, what is the likelihood of somebody being able to jump in front of a bullet in time?
Yeah.
Like
You're like, "Ah," fall on the
why aren't there
ground.
more cases where the person misses?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
like they jump and then the person fires or like
They just miss, you know? I mean, it's definitely one of those, like, cliche events that never actually happen in real life, you
Mhm.
know? But it's a really good representation of, like, okay, how would you kind of put this black and white example in, like, a moral perspective, you
It's
know?
interesting too how we view that kind of event because we view it like, "Oh, like, that was so nice of him," kind of a thing, obviously,
So
but, like,
touching.
like, "Oh, he sacrificed his life," like, kind of a thing, but, like,
Mhm.
why?
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
"Oh my god, he valued that person so much
I
that
didn't
he
ever get.
killed himself."
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's I mean, I think there are some times to where you can be so emotionally invested and connected to a person to where there really is no form of coherent logic that could explain your reasoning besides from a breakdown of the kind of emotional cognitive standpoints that you have on that person. Because, I mean, for me, if I, let's say, I mean, I'm going to use a little bit of some flowery language here, but if I have someone who I love so deeply, and I've spent my entire life with them, and our souls, our hearts, our minds are intertwined and synchronized to such a large degree that losing them would lose the majority of me.
Don't talk about me like that.
Listen, it's true, man. But if that was the case, there is that understanding of, wow, okay, it's worth dying for to potentially keep this part of me that has truly become you, even though it's not you. But living without that person truly leads just a meaningless and miserable life until you die.
Right,
And it's not worth living without that person.
right.
And that's very few and far and in between.
I agree, yeah, like, I
But
think those situations can arise, and I've thought about that before, and I think those situations, like you're saying, are rare, could very well easily happen.
mhm,
Um, for me, and this is just a result of my emotional filtration and kinda internal self-reflecting processes that have happened. over the years. You look frozen right now. You're just like dead still.
I was
Um,
thinking of sorry,
but
I was deep in a thought.
but
You can go.
I think like I just don't let myself value anything to that extent in which the emotions could
Mhm.
overwhelm my
Yeah.
cognitive processes.
Mhm.
Um, and or I try not to. Like there are cases that I haven't accounted for, that that come up that sometimes catch me off guard and can, overwhelm my processing abilities.
Mhm.
But the majority of the times, if it's something consistent in my life, like don't I control those
Mhm.
values there so that they don't get to that point where they
Yeah.
can do that. And so
I mean, the best thing to do would just be to avoid those types of situations, to
yeah,
really
just
never have
don't
to
get in
deal
a
with it.
situation where you're going to
Yeah.
get shot. I mean, that's
Yeah, or someone who is incredibly important to you could get shot either. Like,
but
stay in
here's
safe
here's
places,
here's the thing, and like this, my example earlier of the situations with like you know politicians um, m- and the morality quandaries that arise from a rigid morality system, as well as the problems that arise from a fluid, morality system.
Mhm.
Both of those that exemplifies, though, my um, point, which is that there these are concepts that are often very complex and cannot be defined. They're hard to define even with a fluid system. Like they're hard
Yeah.
to like control and to like account for even in a fluid system. Much
Yeah.
less a single definition,
Mhm.
like. And so we take things like, people get politicians like to weaponize things like abortion, and people like to get upset over those kind
Yeah.
of things, and
Mhm.
will take hard stances one way or the
I
other.
know.
And like they're to me, that's one of the most ignorant things that you can ever do, because that concept and those types of concepts are so
Mhm.
complex and have so many possible scenarios
Yeah.
that um, you taking a universal stance just proves to me that you haven't thought it
Yeah.
through.
I mean, abortion is definitely one of those things to where it's like I'm kind of with you where it's like there's kind of a fluid boundary as to when it should kind of be you could say morally, quote unquote, acceptable. I mean, here's my thing is that it's so saturated and so kind of pinpointed towards both of the extremes to where you have people worshiping on both sides. On the pro choice side, you have people worshiping the death of unborn babies. And that to me is like
Wait.
where
You're saying that people wait.
the extremists on the pro-choice side
Okay,
are very much like, "Yay, you're getting an abortion. I'm so proud of you.
okay.
That's such an
I
incredible
don't know how
thing to
many
do."
people actually do
But
that, but
there are mainly people on social media that are just really, like I said, they're trying to saturate the narrative where you have this, uh,
maybe
this
they're trying
this
to
praise of
maybe they had an abortion, they're trying to feel better about themselves or something like that.
yeah, something like that along those lines. There's a lot of cognitive reasons that's behind their decisions to very much exemplify and kind of just like have an extreme bias towards it. This is an intrinsically good thing to do, and the majority of people should get abortions no matter what because that's just the best. And then you have the other side that kind of worships these kids living in a broken system, no matter how their life turns out. And so there's kind of this extremist vibe going on here with
Mm.
abortion specifically that I really don't like. It's like you can have like a very
Well,
reasonable approach to this.
beyond that, like even the one way or the other vibe, like always one way or always the other one way, not able to see any other point of view
Mhm.
vibe is something that I think is super problematic. And like these situations can get more complex than we currently have the the moral and philosophical structure to
Mhm.
handle. And
Yeah.
so, like for instance, how do we define life? What makes a baby alive versus not alive? Like what defines potential versus versus
Yeah.
life? what makes a human life worth more than, something
Yeah.
else, and like why are those valuations in place if we're going to make these solid one way decisions or the other on this. Those are definitions we have to be able to define,
Mhm.
and we haven't. And so, we even like still think we a lot of people still, view think we have this ambiguous soul, part of us, and and no disrespect towards people that believe that, but like to me, those um things are just kind of remnants and examples of us needing a a clearer definitions for stuff like for instance, we've talked about before, what is consciousness? Like, how do we define consciousness? How do we define that we are sentient
Mhm.
and other things are not?
Yeah.
Like the uh and people, that's kind of where that soul thought came from, was like a lot of people think that we have a soul and that's what makes us better than other things. But um like prove that, like,
Yeah. Mhm.
the
Or like the fact that animals aren't conscious. Like they don't
yeah,
have any
exactly,
awareness.
like,
It's like
and
that is the
so
dumb even if you're religious,
okay,
that's a pretty
exactly,
idiotic
exactly,
viewpoint.
that's a great example. So now, okay, we defined that, like, let's if we accept that animals have a level of
Of
consciousness,
awareness
right, which,
functions.
well,
Yeah.
consciousness to an extent,
Mhm.
not on the same level that we
Yeah.
know it, but like
Mhm.
to an extent,
Yeah.
and we are saying it's okay to kill animals, but it's not okay to kill babies. And just bear with me. I know how bad your moral system is, like wanting to respond to what I'm talking to other people, not you necessarily, but like
Yeah.
moral system is wanting to respond to like this and be like, he said kill babies. Like,
No.
the objective here. The um the if we're saying it's okay to kill babies or kill animals, not kill babies, that means we are defining what is okay to kill and what is not okay to kill by the potential maximum cognitive capabilities that
Yeah. Pretty much just intrinsically the level of qualia.
they have. Mhm.
It's like, well, can they self-reference their own suffering and place it in their own viewpoint of retrospect of their life? And if that's what we mean by suffering, I don't even know if you could put that and assign that to a fetus?
Right.
That's and neither one is kind of applicable in that sense. So I mean, personally, I think we should maximize all potential flourishing life. I think at some point we should probably have a discussion of, well, at some point, when has it become completely hedonistic and kind of irrelevant to get abortions? There's where we've kind of like technologically advanced to the point to where it's not even really a discussion
Right.
anymore. We're kind of
But
on the
rather
brink of
than
that.
dealing with the abortion part first, what we should be dealing with is the society part first, to make sure that our society is one that can actually handle and take care of
Yeah,
infants on its own.
exactly.
Like, we
Should
shouldn't be
take care of that first.
like,
Yes, absolutely.
that should be the thing that we make sure it's something that's healthy for infants and for children and for families
Mhm.
and whatnot, and that that part is in place before we handle making everybody have kids.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, listen, in my opinion is
in my
that
opinion, take out all their eggs, just take
oh,
out all the eggs, and then let
put
them
'em
have them when they want them.
yes, that's a great idea.
Like,
Mhm. And my thing is, I do think abortion, for me personally, is bad, but there's a big but there, a very
very
big
big,
one.
but
It's
it's a
thick,
big one.
where I acknowledge the gray area and the systemic problems that we have to kind of deal and wrestle with first before we can kind of think about, okay, what's the what's the systemic agreement of the morality from a legislature's perspective, and what do we want to choose as a people group?
Mhm.
And if it's become an irrelevant practice, it's kind of like lobotomies, for
Right.
example.
Well, I think we need to agree. on core components in order to be able to make that
Mhm.
decision one way or the other. Like, so
Yeah.
I haven't come to a decision, right or wrong, because it doesn't matter what my
Yeah.
opinion is on it because it depends on the core components that you decide
Yeah.
on. And so if
Mhm.
society decides that, yes, what we are going to qualify as something that's okay to kill versus not okay to kill is his maximum cognitive
Yeah.
capacity, then in that case,
Mhm.
then I think like obviously yes,
Mhm.
it follows that you know um, that if we're defining the maximum cognitive capacity as the average capacity over humans, then yeah, that
Mhm.
don't kill baby.
Yeah.
But then that also raises additional questions of what about people with cognitive deficits? And what about really smart people? Like, are those people now capable of killing other people because they have a higher cognitive capacity than them?
Yeah. It's like, well, if we really care about human flourishing, why not just, like, kind of cut off the people with 90 IQ and below,
Right.
you know?
Which clarifying you are not espousing, but is something that would follow from that line of thinking.
Exactly. I
And
don't
so
personally believe that.
those that's all that like goes to show my point, which was that these are not cut and dry issues.
Mhm.
And they are not something that it makes sense to get mad or even form an opinion over because
Exactly.
they have not been fleshed out. So if you want to
Yeah.
help, either help society or help flesh out the idea, one of the
Yeah.
two.
Like, if you really think abortion is bad, well, there are actually precursors to the reasons behind it that you should actually focus on dealing with. If you
Mhm.
really wanna get rid of it, or do you just wanna scream your moral justice?
Right.
You know, you wanna feel good.
Do you
You wanna
just
have a
want to form an
purpose.
opinion and like shout it at people and like
Yeah.
seem like you're valuable because you're taking vocal action, for something? Or do you want to resolve the problems
Exactly.
and then not worry about convincing other people of it? Because what does their opinion actually matter?
Mhm. Yeah. Exactly, and I do think that, like, technology is kinda gonna be the driving force behind, resolving a lot of these moral qualms that are kind of just pushed by this group of I honestly think that a lot of these, like, binary good, bad things that have been, like, kind of left to these extremists to kinda control the narrative are being pushed so that we can kinda focus on not the issue while the guys behind the scenes are like, "Okay, great, now we can do our own things." They're all worried about this stuff that really is they're not gonna be able to affect by shouting at each other.
Mhm.
So we're gonna continue to make money. You know,
Mhm.
that's probably the narrative that exists, and I'm glad that it seems to be there actually seems to be a pretty good amount of people that understand this and are like, "Okay, let's just not deal with this right now. Let's kinda deal with the major problems here." And I'm very curious to see kind of the next couple of years of development in the direction in which we understand the people who are actually controlling the scenes. Because there's pretty much you'll meet just about everyone who understands, okay, there's 3 companies that control the cereals, there's, like 5 companies that control the media, and then 10 families that control the wealth, you know? That seems to be a very general thing that a lot of people understand now, which is not something that I would have said a couple of years ago. And I think that has a lot to do with the explosion in technology and information. And so we are actually able, while this influx of information has a lot of downsides and like bad effects on like our attention mechanisms, it allows for the expansion of attention on these certain issues like control. And the more we're actually able to break free from that control, that a lot is sociological, we can actually start to progress towards that more fluid, like moral system that is even collective, that doesn't have to do anything with the legislature, you know?
Mhm.
So I think that's to put a little bit of optimism there, you know? And there's optimism in this kind of systemic collapse that could be seen through the lens of too much information being available to too many people to be unaware of the current situations that are going on, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
so we do get to the point where people understand that that there are these certain amount of people that are controlling the system to where at least getting them out of power, and it's and that I don't think we're here yet. We're not close. But getting these specific people out of power, lessening their influence, putting them in their place where they're supposed to be, they can still be a
How do
part
you
of
do
this
that though
working
if they're the
class.
ones making the decisions? Which it
Exactly.
brings up a really good
But
like
they make the decision through
example
control.
of my moral quandary of killing somebody versus not killing them.
Mhm.
What if you were to kill somebody in that position? They were so deeply entrenched they could not be removed. It was very unlikely there would be a way to remove them um, via a the normal legal system because they
Yeah.
control the legal system.
Mhm.
And so in that situation, killing them would be a high likely outcome of getting them out of the system, which would then allow society to move forward
Yeah.
and continue to progress. And so you're banking, if you were to take that action, you'd be banking on the outcome of that actually fixing
Yeah.
the problem, and you'd be signing up for the consequences if it didn't.
I mean, personally, I just from kind of the perspective of the progression towards a more altruistic and conglomerate society, I think holding them more so in a position as like almost like a prisoner of war, for example, to where like you are completely restricted and you're under our control. You're keeping here, you're not going anywhere,
That
you're
sounds
done
great
for.
in theory, but,
It does sound it I know what you're saying, and that there's there's kind of that political and economic influence that they will still have in those connections.
no, it's not that, it's how do you even get that how do you even get them there if they control everything? Like, if they control the system, there's only one way.
But you have to have people that are in the system in order for there to even be a functioning one. If that
Right,
is overturned, then there
but
doesn't need to be the need for,
if
like,
they
that
if they
violence.
control the system, that means they have a lot of power, which means they control people, which means they can protect themselves against people taking them out of the system and putting them in a prisoner of. So I'm not saying that, I'm saying that in an ideal system, you would be right, that, that could be an action you would take. But in an unideal system where power is able to entrench itself, they can prevent that from happening. So in those situations, the we are left with no real options. And
Mm,
so the one option that you do have left, unfortunately, as unoptimal as it is, is taking that person out permanently
mm.
so that they can no longer influence people.
What if just somebody replaces them?
Hmm?
If somebody replaces them?
Well, I'm
Seems very
sure
simple.
somebody would replace them, but
Oh, I guess you were saying kinda like that emphasis on keeping them in check, and they
right, and it
understand that they're in
was
a very dangerous position.
yes, and
That's
it's using that in combination with the allowing the system now a temporary period of fluidity where because that person is gone, it's like it's like something being stuck in a wheel mechanism that's preventing it from turning. Like if you take it out, you're allowing that wheel to start moving again. And so the if somebody is preventing certain political or certain decisions from being made that are to a benefit from society, take them out, that wheel can start moving again. And that way, the before someone new becomes so entrenched that they can make those
mhm,
control those components and make those decisions, hopefully society can cover over those
yeah,
patches. And that would be where that calculation would come into play. You'd have to have some sort of game plan in place. You probably wouldn't just want to leave that kind of thing up to chance. You'd want to have some sort of game plan in place to influence that process, like
yes,
have something set up in advance to have everything prepared to maybe present a bill or um, bring up an issue, and try and prompt that action to take. Because if it
yeah,
doesn't work out and somebody new gets entrenched, that means you've that the outcome of that action that you took was not worth it.
mhm, and ended up probably being just overall bad because
Exactly.
now you have attention on you, and now you're probably done for at that point.
Exactly.
If you weren't able to start that systematic change, and that's I do think that we are versatile enough to get to where we could work very hard and even be relatively successful at generalizing the the flourishing of the entire population to where we have people's baseline needs met or easily accessible. And so you have the ability for this more exchange of ideas to be less uh, emotionally needed because they are already in a place of satisfaction to where they can be cool-headed. You know, they're not driven by these more limbic, more emotional functions that are needed because they're still on this constant pressure of survival. They need to survive. And when you survive, you can only kind of latch on to these tribalistic decisions to they need things to be black and white because they don't have the energy to expend to really uh, uh really wrestle with these morality issues and these systemic issues. And so if we can it's interesting because you can either change it from the outside and then through that kind of through the cracks break open and then and then pull out the change, or you could start to change from the bottom up. It's like, do you want to go top down or bottom up approach to this thing? And I think the best thing to do would be both, kind of
Exactly. When you're
sandwich it.
breaking into the ATM, go from the bottom and the top at the same time, then you get the change.
Exactly. Just like that. It's a good analogy, I guess. I was
Just you said
I was
break into it and then change, like,
oh, yeah, yeah.
or get the change out, like, right afterwards, and so it made me think of ATMs.
I was thinking more like pressure creates diamonds, where you come at it from the top and the bottom, you just kind of pressure into bang, get something beautiful
True,
out of it,
yeah.
And, you just everyone starts to be living so good that they just can't help but notice the intrinsic corruption of these other people. It's like, "Hey, I know you're really wealthy and you have all this great lavish lifestyles. That's great. We're living pretty well too."
Also, question, why are there so many old people running our country?
Exactly. It's I cannot wait until they just naturally die. Like, why haven't they died yet? I don't understand this. Like, get out of there. And plus, the majority of the millennials,
There
in
should
like,
be an age limit to running the country, like,
but the thing is, the people running the country would be way above the age limit. So
why
of
would
course
they
they're not going to put
why
it
would
in.
they ever decide to put an age limit?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is idiotic that we as a collective society keep putting them in office, and it really does make you wonder if it is all rigged. Because
Mhm.
why the hell are they in there?
Exactly.
Nobody that I've talked to wants them in there.
Yep.
Everyone that I've talked to wants an age term and like an age limit.
Mhm.
So why aren't we putting in the people that are
And
young enough to want that? You know?
when you start falling apart, you probably shouldn't be making decisions for everybody.
Hell no. Absolutely not. And and the ways that they do things, so old fashioned. They're not able to keep up. Their brains aren't versatile. They can't change. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. And so as we're entering this
They
fast new
can, it just takes
technology,
a long time in the right
very long
circumstances,
time.
and, like,
We don't
they don't want to, so, like, why
yeah,
would they?
they don't have a long time.
Yeah.
We need to make decisions now. There are very critical infrastructure and societal changes that are happening rapidly,
Mhm.
like so quickly. Like year by year, things are just progressing in unimaginable ways. Technology, energy efficiency, engineering. It's so many different things. And
The one extreme that I wish Trump would do, sorry to interrupt.
go.
Uh, the one extreme, he's tried to do some of this on a lower level, but, like, one extreme I wish he would do, I just wish he would wipe the whole governmental, like, like, everyone involved in the government. So wipe them, like, get them out, start from scratch,
That would be
and,
interesting.
like, that would be a great step.
Mhm.
I think we should wipe the whole system and come up with something new, but I don't see
Little
how
unconstitutional, if you will.
how that would, yeah, happen
Mhm.
under the Constitution, because that
Yeah.
probably prevents that from
And
happening.
I'm someone who genuinely thinks that the Constitution is a fairly well curated piece of document
I
and
don't.
law for the time
For
that it
the
was written
time,
in,
yes, but
and that's how we got the most successful nation in the world,
yeah,
America, because there was a foundation there that had a lot of potential, and then over time, it just really wasn't able to keep up, especially with the Industrial Revolution, and then we have the information age that we're in now. It's not necessarily curated for that, you know?
yeah,
And I personally, I don't have any plans to want to change the Constitution because that's not really my thing. There are people who probably have a here's my thing, is that the people who are against the Constitution, I'm not necessarily against the Constitution. I don't really know what that means. But the people who are have equally as old ideas that they want to implement in place of the Constitution. And it's like that's equally as bad. We have to change something new. We have to create something new and dynamic,
Yeah,
you know?
and also saying you're just against the Constitution makes it sound like you haven't read the Constitution, because
Exactly.
if you actually had read the Constitution and you were against, you would say what it is that you're against in the Constitution, not
Exactly.
that you're against the Constitution. You'd
Mhm.
say, "I'm against this
This is it.
idea and this idea
Mhm.
for this reason."
Yeah, and it's crazy because 'cause I've listened to debates, kinda like constitutional debates, and the people who talk about this really use this flowery language that really doesn't get to the substance of any of the issues within the constitutions, and when you kind of, like, confront them about it, they're like, "Whoa, you know," and they don't really actually say anything,
Yeah.
and I would honestly genuinely
You're talking
encourage
about politicians? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean,
That's like
people
essentially what politicians do.
people who are really, sucking on those politicians,
Yeah,
day and night, those types of people who are really just almost like parasites,
yeah,
who kinda just, like, try to live off of the substance of other people and don't really have anything for themselves. And, I what I've seen is that they'll try to replace something that has some good, but they'll find the bad and conflate it and then say we need something different like this, propose something, and they'll conflate the good into where you kind of have this almost like a worse system in place, because I don't think a lot of these older ideas are actually better than the current constitution that we have right now. Like
yeah,
there's a reason why you can defend it and defend it pretty well, like there are a lot of good rights that are allowed and can't be changed because of the Constitution, and in an imperfect system, it is something that kind of holds together some symbolism of like a commonsensical structure as to how we should,
yeah,
converse
and
and do things.
I'll be honest, like, I don't know the Constitution well enough to be able to point out specific things that it says that I disagree with. Um, I do know the system in which I live, and I do know the way that that is set up inherently, and I do know the flaws that are allowing people to become
Mhm.
entrenched and
Yeah.
and people have power to
Mhm.
maintain that power. And so while I'm not familiar enough with the Constitution as a document to be able to like point to where those areas are that cause those things to happen,
Yeah.
like, I could talk about like the systemic issues and and that likely stem from that
Yeah.
core setup.
And often kind of stem
But
from constitutional amendments.
yeah, and um the biggest issue with it, and the biggest issue with trying to replace it with something old that already exists, is that we don't need a type of government.
Mm.
Like, just take a moment and process that statement. We don't need a type of government. Doesn't matter what our type of government is. We don't need a type of government. We need a fluid system that allows the government to change and enforces the ability to change, because we need the ability to try new things and fail. And we need the
Yeah.
ability to change them when we need to. And it needs to be something that does not allow people to become entrenched, and in something that enforces that.
Yeah.
And so there are entrenchment means that somebody can cause it to stop changing. So that needs to be something, that is enforced through the fluidity. It needs to be
Mhm.
like a system that in all areas is allowed to evolve and change with the times year
Yeah.
by year and
Just when you have, like,
have people making decisions that should be making decisions.
mhm. I mean, I 100% agree with that. Just kinda sucks when you have these global superpowers who are very totalitarian dictatorships that really don't give you any room to allow for that kind of error and then error correction, because if you make an error, they'll exploit that, and
Oh
try
yeah.
to influence. I mean, I think a lot
Well,
of
it's
the
all about who can like
yeah.
take power from the other
Mhm.
players and
Exactly.
become further
Yeah,
entrenched.
it's completely a power dynamic when you get up into, like, the actual how countries interact with each other and how they spy on each other, how they try to influences each other's, just political landscape and as well as economic, just I mean, so many factors at play here that they all try to, like, fully embed themselves in. And so, even if as a conglomerate society, we're like, "Okay, we wanna do this," the other countries, like China, Russia, they might be like, "That's wonderful. You do that, and every time you mess up, we'll make sure to really butt
Be
in
there
there."
to exploit it.
Exactly, and so there's really no room, and it's like, "Come on, guys. What are we gonna like,
Like, why
what."
can't we just all be people that are working together and don't like that's one of the things that ever since I've been a kid, a little kid old enough to understand what they are, has boggled my mind. Why is there countries? Like they're like I get the evolutionary development that caused countries, but to me now, why is there
I
countries?
mean, it
Like
is
why are there
yeah,
countries?
I
Like
mean
we are humans. We are all humans. We all want to feel safe and secure. We can all achieve that if we were to work together and stop, kind of looking out for ourselves and our own immediate interests, and most people would be willing to do that. Like they're willing to give up their immediate interests for a better future.
mhm,
Um, People in power and then control have it pretty good. So they don't have an interest
yeah.
in that kind of thing.
I mean, they just have
Um,
such a radically different perspective on life. It's all power dynamics. They're
to me, there's like
devastating.
nothing like less respectful. Like there's nothing less and there's nothing that will make you less of a human in my eyes than caring about power.
Mm,
Like that makes you feel very animalistic to me and primal and somebody that has not thought through things. Um,
not incredibly sophisticated.
like power does not matter if it's not needed, like which it should not be needed at this point in societal development.
Yeah.
We should be able to have safety and security without selfishly acquiring power for ourselves. Um, and if I was in a decision making place, no matter how much power I had, in fact, that would be a reason for me probably wanting to get into the decision making place. But like, no
Yeah.
matter how much power or money I had, there's no decision that m- that I would make in that situation that would seem worthwhile except improving society. Like
Mhm.
that is the reason for that position. And if I have power there, it is so that I can fulfill that position properly.
Yeah.
And so if I have that power, I'm going to use it to like make a better system
Mhm.
and not to just improve my own
Yeah.
life because I can live a meaningful life other ways.
Mhm.
Like I can find value from having been a major player in helping to change the world.
Exactly. And, it's a lot of people, especially those people up top, it's kind of goes back to how children play. You know, originally, there's a winner and a loser. Now, if you play again, and the person who won last time wins again, that is going to have a negative effect on how the other person is going to want to play with you. If you don't let them win at least 30% of the time, you're not going to have a friend anymore.
True.
And there's something really good about that is that we have to understand, oh, you have to give a little in order to receive kind of what you want. But the
It's a
problem
yin and yang.
is that when it comes to these high stakes global games, you only have one chance. There's only one winner and one loser one time. And so it is an all out race for that one win. If you don't get it, millions die.
Yeah.
And that's okay because they're all just statistics.
Or you just don't get another
Or
chance.
you don't get another you really just don't get another chance. And, just the side effect of that, cascading effect,
Is
is
a lot more dramatic,
a
yeah.
lot more dramatic. It's because there is no, "Oh, I don't get to play this anymore if I don't let someone else win." It's like there's one chance for me to win, and there's only one winner, and it better be me. I'm gonna make sure it is. That's
Mhm.
what everyone else on the top is looking at, and it's
But
a
the problem
very,
is that you
very
get
fun game.
it's like it's like the League of Legends effect. Like, when you're playing League of Legends and you think, "If I just win one game, like, I'll be good and I can stop it then."
Mhm.
But it's not just one game. There's always another game to
Always
be
have
played.
Yeah.
There's always another game to win.
Mhm.
And,
It's one more game.
well, if I have this much power and if I'm this good, let's just increase that even more. Like,
Of course. Of
let's win
course.
another one. Like, and you get caught up in that cycle in that game. And like you were saying, and it ends up evolving into just being about the game and like not about doing anything worthwhile.
Mhm.
Um, and it's unfortunate that that's the way it is. But like in those games, there aren't any winners. We're all losers in that
Yeah.
situation. They're losers. They lose eventually.
Mhm.
Um, and we're all losers because we have to deal with the repercussions of those decisions that are made for their pursuit of power.
I mean, we're just numbers to them that really don't have any personal effect on their life.
I'm
Mhm.
7,225.
Yes. I think I'm 4, bro.
4?
Yeah.
You got 4?
Mhm.
Lucky.
That's what that's what the deep state told me. They're like, "You're number 4." Still just a statistic, though. I
Dang.
don't care if I die, but at least give me a cool number.
At least sounds cool. Yeah, you can just say you're 4. I have to say I'm 7,225. Like,
I don't know, I kinda like bigger numbers, you know? I feel like since they picked me first, I'm, like, first on the chopping block,
oh, yeah.
essentially.
First to lose your head.
Exactly.
Like, all right, well, we're executing all of society one by one. So let's call them out in order.
1, 2, 3.
All right. 4 is next.
God dang it. I lost. I mean, you know, I don't wanna sound like a conspiracy theorist, of course, but I do think that there is somewhat, even if it's not a purposeful, like, conjoined plan, I do think that there is a process towards very large amount of depopulation. That is actually something that is being worked towards, and I can't
Why?
exactly put my finger on it yet.
Why?
There seems to be an incentive of less about the nuclear family and propagation and more about individual, just kind of mindless success when and just completely money and
That's
hedonistically driven.
capitalism.
That's capitalism for sure. And I think that that also kind of exists in other places. It just looks a little bit different and more so like the actual system, the actual government controlling those decisions for you. Instead, we have this influential aspect where it influences our lives, but we technically have the decision to make that for ourselves. It's just everything is against us to make that decision. There's other places where they have actual regulatory laws on what you can actually do. You know, so I think there's and I think those are gonna somewhat converge till we get to this point to where no one's really having a lot of children, and people don't really have the time for that, and they were never really taught that that's a good thing, and people that do, well, I mean, you know, they weren't able to make a lot of money, they weren't able to be successful, like, why would I want to be a part of that? And then you kind of have this standpoint where from a technological standpoint, you can just grow people in a lab, you know? And
Yeah.
people in the
I'd say
lab
that that
can
could
be smarter, better looking, better at doing things, better physically better physically, and, you know, it's just the paradigm's gonna change.
I'd say that that could be the case. It's likely gonna be an effect, not a, um,
Well,
not a goal. Like, it's something that's gonna
I think the effects
come
already
about because of, the fact that our government has not if it comes about, it'll come about because of the fact that government is not changing and does not care about the well-being of the society, and the society is growing to the point that now it's causing poverty and people that are struggling day to day, to make a living and really just don't even have space for that kind of a
Mhm.
thing, and the emotional space for family and having
Yeah.
kids and whatnot, um, and you get a degradation of life, kind of quality and parenting and emotional qualities and whatnot
Mhm.
as a result, which then causes them to like pull away from that idea and resulting in a decrease in population.
It's kinda like how life has a direction. It's all kind of the
Cause and effect.
river's predetermined to flow this way,
Yep.
and that effect, I think, is from a top-down level realized, and they understand that this is the cause and effect that's going to play out, and they're going to ride it as happily as possible, and they are not going to influence that to be something that doesn't happen.
I don't know if they actually even realize that, because I think that the direction it, it's heading, and this is despite my more pessimistic tendencies, I think that, society tends to be self-correcting, and,
Hope so.
I think that the direction that it is going is a point in the cycle where it gets so bad that it needs to be good, like, it needs to be made good, and so,
Yeah.
um,
Just how many hundreds of millions have to die before we get to that point?
that is the question, is, like, how bad is it gonna get? Is that scale gonna be continue, because as society kind of begins integrating, those bads start getting bigger and bigger and bigger because they affect more and more people.
Mhm.
And so, the question is like, is the bad going to get so bad that that it's um, causes all systems to break down,
Yeah.
or is the bad just going to get bad enough that it causes some change in our current system?
I mean, that I think that'd be ideal, you know, a little bit of some, like, environmental stressors that kind of wake us up. That would be ideal, but I think those already exist. But I think the distractions in life and the illusion of a good society that we live in, and that it's going to stay this way, and that, you know, while, you know, sure, maybe the egg prices are a couple more dollars than what they should be, but at least to some degree, the majority of people who, you know, live in the suburbs, you know, they're fine. They're gonna get, you know, maybe they're not gonna be able to afford a house, but they'll be able to get an apartment, you know, and maybe they don't have any kids, but at least they're alive and they can watch Netflix and, you know, dabble in some very, you know, just distracting, like, okay, this kind of helps me relax. I'll just live my life this way. That and they're gonna get to the point to where those distractions are gonna get even better and better and better and better at hijacking your natural mechanisms that are meant for finding the good in those environmental pressures and making them manifest. They're gonna hijack them and put them towards a different direction. And that's I think I'm with you on the point that that's actually more so not purposeful, but just something that happens out of capitalism, you know?
Hmm.
But it's kind of like we're gonna be the frogs in the slowly boiling water, you know?
Hmm.
And we're all gonna boil, you know? Maybe there are some people who
That
don't, but
is, I don't know if like, I suppose like they hadn't had an experience with this type of system before, so maybe it makes sense why they didn't think of this. But like when they came up with capitalism, it feels like they didn't think it through because like it's not that it was a terrible system. Like it's better than a lot of others.
Yeah.
But we think about this logically. Let's all encourage everyone get as much power and money as possible. Let's reward the highest money makers in society. Everybody's competing for each other, like to to be make more money and to be that person. And if we follow that, what is likely to happen from that kind of a system, you start getting like these peak points that become higher and higher and higher, people with more and more and more money that are able to use everything below them to help increase their peak
Mhm.
and reducing everyone else's ability to do that.
Like, there was opportunity. It's just over time as the people who win again and
They're
continue to
able to
win.
easier win. Exactly.
Exactly.
When you win
And
once and it makes it easier to win
the
the next time.
yeah, the sliver of chance that you might have had 20 years ago definitely doesn't exist now, you know?
Yeah.
Just really doesn't. And there's just the chances of you being hyper successful is just almost 0, you know? And it was, I would say, pretty small of a margin back then too, but it's just become less and less and less over time. And even to be somewhat successful has gotten a lot more difficult, a lot more difficult. And it was still hard back then
Mm.
to some degree, but you could at least, you know, find a job. You didn't have to go to college or anything and then
If
have a
you were a
family.
go-getter, you could go and get it.
Mhm. You know, if you wanted to work hard, that's really all you had to do to have a house, have a family, and live a good life and, you know, have a good retirement.
Yeah.
That's not even that's in that honestly is like a really
And
boring life, and it's not possible
and
right now.
now, even if you're willing to subscribe to that
Yeah,
and you're willing to work hard, the best that you can usually get is a pure maintenance of like basic living
yeah.
conditions.
And not
Like
even really enough to take, like, a lot of vacations
like you
and
can't go
somewhere to
anywhere, you
live.
can't do
Mhm.
anything.
Yeah,
You can just maintain your state.
exactly. You can survive,
Mhm.
whatever that means. If I knew that I was gonna live the rest of my life that way, I'd kill myself right now,
Mhm.
genuinely. That just
Yep.
doesn't sound like anything worth living for, you know? I'd
Like
rather be an advocate for change.
yeah, like well, I mean, I think at that point if I had the foreknowledge knowing that my life was going to turn out that way and I was unable to change that particular part of it, I'd make sure that I would end my life, but I'd make it something useful, like a meaningful, like a martyr.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely the way to do it. Be a martyr.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, it's
On
getting
that note.
pretty late, so the we'll be back on Tuesday
Yep.
for our topics. We're gonna move those
Mhm.
to Tuesday. We're gonna cover those two that we were talking about earlier, the hypothalamus
Hypothalamus.
and LSTM cells,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we will cover that on Tuesday. Then we might also fit a new topic in there. We'll see.
Yeah.
And
Definitely
then
a nootropic on Friday.
yeah,
Mhm.
and then on Friday we'll do our regular podcast because we looks like we're probably going to be moving at least temporarily to Fridays.
Mhm.
So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this fascinating discussion. Hope we didn't
No
upset too
problem.
many people.
I hope we did.
I know I found it interesting, and I love talking about this stuff because it's stuff that needs to be talked about.
For sure.
So um, hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you guys on Tuesday.
Peace.